150-pound, 22-year-old Amadeo Diallo standing defenseless in the vestibule of his own home. And either way you look at it, Amadeo Diallo never stood a chance. Amadeo Diallo was a good person, and he lived among other good people. And try as they will, the defense cannot blame their actions on Amadeo Diallo, and they can't blame them on Wheeler Avenue either. Now, in the summations, they may have made some belatedly nice remarks about Wheeler Avenue, but that's not the way it was portrayed throughout this trial. That's not how it was portrayed when you heard in an opening about perhaps the most dangerous, or one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city is Soundview, and by implication, Wheeler Avenue is made part of it. They told you they'd prove that. One of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city of New York, and they didn't. But you got to see the people of Wheeler Avenue, and you got to know what kind of people they were. Debbie Rivera, 22 years old, lived in her mother's apartment with her husband and her kids for 5 years. She's lived in the Bronx for 16 of them. Her husband works maintenance 6 days a week, sometimes until after midnight. There's a school on her block. Mamadou Kujaba went to junior college in Gambia, lives at Wheeler Avenue about 5 years. He works 2 jobs as a nurse's aide, often 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. Amadeo Diallo lived there with him for 2 years. He spoke English, French, Fula, and he read Spanish. Thomas Bell, 28 years old, been a police officer, 7 months. He's lived in the area over 5 years. He said it's not a high crime area. It's a safe street. He worked at Saks Fifth Avenue as a loss prevention officer and a fire safety director from 2:30 in the afternoon until 11 o'clock at night. Ida Vincent, 25 years old, lived at 1153 Wheeler for 4 years. Husband worked as a warehouseman in the Bronx for 6 years. He works in the morning, early hours, so he's not home at night. She stays home and cares for her children. And when necessary, she walks them home through her neighborhood, through her block at night. Bernardo Javier, one of the defense witnesses, 35 years old, lived at 1156 Wheeler, works in a hair accessory business, been married, has 2 children. Louis Augusto, he lives at 1148. He works at Newark Airport. He was new to the block, only been there a couple of weeks. He considered himself a stranger. And Amadeo Diallo, he worked in Lower Manhattan, outside a convenience store, and you saw the person he worked with, Mr. Chowdhury, who told you. He worked 10 to 12-hour days, 6, sometimes 7 days a week. He sold things outside the store. Traveled from his house to and from the Bronx on the subway. It wasn't an easy life. None of those lives are easy. But they're solid. And the neighborhood was good. The neighborhood was good. On February 3rd, 1999, Amadeo Diallo left the convenience store, got on the subway, and he got home, back to the Bronx, just shortly before midnight. When he got to his apartment, a little after that, and he talked with Mamadou Kajabi, his roommate, about the most ordinary things in life, just one of them, details of living, paying a utility bill. And he told him, Amadeo told his roommate, that he, Amadeo, would pay the bill next day. Never got the chance. There are certain objective realities about this case that I think we need to accept, discuss right up front. When Amadeo Diallo stood in the entranceway to his home at 1157 Wheeler Avenue, he had the absolute right to be there. That's been mentioned on summation, but it really ought to be emphasized, because I think that's an objective reality that we can't lose sight of. It's also an objective reality that he was unarmed, he was doing nothing wrong, and he was minding his own business. The only things that he had on him at that time: a wallet, his beeper, and his keys. That's it. We go from that, a man standing in the doorway of his own home, to an autopsy report. And it shows that his last meal had not yet been digested, and that he had no alcohol or drugs of any kind in his system. Out in the night air, digesting his last meal. No alcohol or drugs to make him do anything strange, any kind. You heard a suggestion in the opening statement by the defense that Amadeo Diallo felt compelled to avoid the police. There is an objective reality once we got past the opening statement of the defense. There is not a shred of evidence that Amadeo Diallo felt any need whatever to avoid any police. There were no 911 calls or radio runs about Wheeler Avenue that night. There was no complaint by any person that anyone was acting suspiciously on Wheeler Avenue that night. There was no report of an urgent situation, indeed of any situation, on Wheeler Avenue that night. And the defendants concede, as another objective reality, that most people they encounter do not have guns. Now, you heard from Mr. Patton that there's been a real dispute in this case about lighting. I don't think on the evidence that's true. I think there really is no dispute what the lighting was actually like on Wheeler Avenue that night, and in the vestibule and on the street. Let's look. Mr. McCarthy? Let's look at what the witnesses said about the lighting. Lieutenant Kevin Cantwell, as I was probably halfway across the sidewalk, you could see inside the vestibule. He said there was a light on in the vestibule, and you could see Mr. Diallo, his wallet, his beeper, and a beeper holder in the vestibule, as shown in photograph 7A8. This is photograph 7A8, where you can see the things that the lieutenant saw when he got there, before any crime scene people had arrived. This is what he could see. Detective Joseph Lanino, crime scene detective. There's no need for any additional or auxiliary lighting. And we know that this crime scene and emergency service unit have those big lights that can light up anything, make it look like a ballpark or a parking lot. He could have gotten them. He didn't need them. He had no difficulty writing his notes outside. He said he didn't have to go under a street light to do it. He could do it anywhere he wanted. Lighting is sufficient to see Mr. Diallo. And as to writing notes, you'll remember that Sergeant Schumacher, whom the defense called, they say all the evidence in this case is their evidence. Well, he's part of their evidence. And he said he had no difficulty writing his notes either, outside. Both lights in the vestibule were on, one by the top entrance, one on the ceiling. Photo, emergency medical technician Donald Riley. Photo 7A8. This is a fair and accurate representation of the lighting in the vestibule at 12:45 a.m. Now, Detective Flanino, he took this photo, and he was there at 1:45. That's an hour later. So him seeing the light on outside, or him saying that this is a fair and accurate representation with his flash, well, you might have had a question about it. He cleared it up by telling you that this was a fair and accurate representation of the lighting, even with his naked eye. And EMT Riley is pointing out that this is a fair and accurate representation of what he saw 1 hour before crime scene had arrived. The vestibule was well lit. Everything in quotes is in the record. The others, we paraphrase, and certainly you can check that. From the outside, you could see the light coming from inside the vestibule, and he could see the victim from inside as he approached. Craig Angard, medical legal investigator. Photo 7A8, this one again, is a fair and accurate representation of the lighting conditions in the vestibule. He observed Mr. Diallo's wounds. He observed a hole in the beeper. This beeper. This hole. He observed the beeper clip attached to the waistband. No flashlight needed. Debbie Rivera. Debbie Rivera told you that she lived down the block at 1162 Wheeler Avenue. She said, I could see everything. First light of the entrance, it was on. That was the one she had the angle of. The light outside. The light portrayed here on the model, under 1157. From her angle, this is the light she would see. And she saw it was on. The entrance to 1157 Wheeler was light. Amadeo describing the vestibule. There is enough light to read. There is enough light to see the keyhole and insert the key, and he talked about 2 keyholes. He talked about the little mailbox key, which he described as 2 centimeters, and he talked about the front door. Neither one did he ever need any additional light in order to be able to find those keyholes. He didn't need any additional light to be able to read his mail. At 11:50 p.m., outside lights and the middle lights and the hall lights were all on. You know, let's stop the trio. Because an issue was made on several of these summations about this particular witness, and I'd like to address that. You heard that we called her as a grand jury witness, because that's an investigative body. And that witness was presented. And when we considered who to call for this case, we wanted to bring people before you we feel you would be able to have confidence and trust. And we had concerns because this particular witness had gone first to a news reporter, and apparently during the course of the trial went back to a news reporter and had more interviews. And you saw the way she testified. And so we determined that bringing her in as a witness might dilute your view of the other credibility of the other witnesses we called.
Objection, Your Honor, putting his own credibility.
Overruled.
They decided.
Overruled.
So we didn't call her, and they chose to. Now, it's been said, we're going to try to run away and say, well, just don't pay her any mind. Well, let me say right here and now to you, it's exactly the opposite. If they want to make an issue of Sri Elliott's testimony, let's make an issue of Sri Elliott's testimony. Let's not select out the few things that we might want to hear, like the word gun. Let's look at the things that Sri Elliott said that she was never inconsistent about. She saw Amadeo Diallo on top of the vestibule, outside. She saw his back. She saw the front passenger and the right passenger exit first, the left rear passenger, and then the driver. Guns were drawn. She saw Amadeo Diallo turn counterclockwise toward the officers who were on the sidewalk. She heard the word gun. Defendants had their back to her. She never heard any words, no commands before the word gun. She never saw anyone fall. That would include Edward McMillan. And as to his medical records, who would be the source of his medical records but Edward McMillan?
Objection. That's not the part that was admitted in evidence.
Overruled.
She placed the position of the officers when they got out of their cars in this semicircle. That was the position that she testified. The fact that she said the light was on is almost beside the point. Because if you do choose to accept all of these things too, that Sri Elliott was not consistent about, we can stop here. Because that's the end of the case. These four defendants would be guilty now. There isn't even a hint of justification that was made out on Sri Elliott's testimony. Not a hint. It proves, if you accept her testimony, they're liars. Because the things that she said, they denied. Edward McMillan fell. She said he didn't. They said they gave commands. Police, don't move. Show us your hands. Show us your hands. Don't move. A word with you. She heard none of it. None of it. And she was there. She saw them circle the doorway. Their guns were drawn. They're looking for an explanation of Amadeo Diallo's fear. They're looking for why he's retreating. Ask Sri Elliott then. Because Sri Elliott has guns in everybody's hand. Who wouldn't be afraid? Who would do anything else faced with four big men getting out of a car with guns? And they are all big. And he's 5'6", 150. That's the Sri Elliott that three of their attorneys, three experienced lawyers say, changed the momentum of this case and turned it around and made it happen for them. And I sat before I came here today and I frankly didn't know what I would say about Sri Elliott because I didn't know how you had received her and how much credibility you would invest in her given the way she testified on the stand. But they resolved my problem. They made an issue. They said that this was the person that turned the case around. This is the person that made it all true for the defense. No. This is the witness who makes the defense case untrue. This is the witness who, if that version is accepted, then they just shot down a man who had no chance even to display this wallet. Forget this wallet even looking like a gun. Forget any kind of justification in this case at all. With Sri Elliott's testimony, four men with guns shot Amadeo Diallo down in his stairs. They picked out a few points, and they forgot about everything else. So no, we don't run from Sri Elliott. We leave to you how much credibility you wish to give it. That's for your judgment, your decision. And certainly, all of these facts that I just put before you are things about which she was not inconsistent. And if they are true, and if you accept them, the case ends now. And they are all guilty of the crimes in this indictment. And we should not forget about it. So here, Looking now at this point, the light outside was on and bright.